We're out here to explore some of the archaeology and talk to some of the experts about some of the things that went on dozens or hundreds of years ago. The Idaho National Laboratory site sits on a vast expansion of open land that over thousands of years has been home to countless animal species and groups of humans. Because that land has been home to so many through the years, INL employs its own team of archaeologists, the INL Cultural Resources Management Team.
The INL Cultural Resource Management Office helps DOE maintain their archaeological sites and also their built environment resources they have here at the INL. Part of our job is to identify those important properties, those cultural resources, and help DOE preserve them for future knowledge and also to learn from our past as well. For all surveys, as archaeologists, what we do is try to identify the sites and cultural resources we have on the landscape.
A large portion of the land surrounding the site was part of the Carey Act, an 1894 law designed to assist in the nation's westward expansion by allowing public land to be sold to private corporations for the purpose of homestead developments.
Right now, we're standing in the channel of the Big Lost River at the head gates of the Carey Act project for the Big Lost River Irrigation Project. Back in 1894, the Carey Act was passed, and that allowed the federal government to transfer large amounts of the public domain to the individual states here in the Desert West, like Idaho, at 1 million acres a time. These structures in particular were built between 1909 and 1910. It's difficult for us to know right now exactly how many people came out. Some people bought lands as purely an investment with the hopes that the land would become more valuable once irrigation was established and homesteads became successful. There could have been up to 600 homesteads out here if the project had succeeded. Unfortunately, the lack of water meant ultimately the Powell Tract was cancelled and all the individual settlers lost their opportunity to farm out here. We have construction camps along the length of the irrigation project where the workers lived and their day-to-day lives, while they were constructing these canals. And we know from census records of the construction camp at the Mackey Dam that there were a number of different nationalities represented, and from Italian to Greek to Austrian. And so when we find the archaeology out here of the people who were living, we can start to understand what their day-to-day lives were while they were out here in 1910 building these projects. Some people put everything they had into building these homesteads, into trying to settle on the land, and so we see everything from children's toys to lawnmowers. Ultimately, these particular sites, they're a story of failure, unfortunately, and so really it's what was left behind.
We are at the construction camp for the Big Lost River head gates. This is where these people had lived while they were constructing those head gates for the canal. We know of about a dozen camps. There's likely more along the stretch of the canal. However, this is just one of the larger ones that we have, and it's likely like an epicenter, a hub of where all the activity was going on. So this camp was likely here between 1909 and 1910. From the artifacts that we have, that's the date that we actually have hit on.
One of the more unique structures that stands today on this land is what the archaeology team has come to call the Italian bread oven.
This is what we're calling a stone oven. It has several names. It could be an Italian bread oven, but nonetheless it is a stone oven that they had used for cooking breads and possibly other bakery products or foods and things. It's made and constructed of local basalt from the surrounded area. It tells us how these people lived when they were laboring out here. What they were doing and the types of people that we have that have basically constructed the United States that we have today.
So what does the Cultural Resource Management Team consider an archaeological find?
As an archaeologist, we study everything from 50 years or even older. As we review and record these sites, it's part of my job to kind of imagine what the landscape was, because you have to put yourself in the mindset of these people who were living out here. Not only 100 years ago, but 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago, the environment was completely different than what we have today. This area maybe 10,000 years ago was very lush, and there was a lake actually over here called the Territon Lake, and it would ebb and flow through the seasons. And it brought in a lot of fauna and humans in this area because there was a lot of food and resources in this area.
And what finds are especially exciting for this team of archaeologists?
It sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I think every find's exciting when you can relate that to people, individual people, and you can understand what their life was like. So whether it's a tin can and we can say, this is what they were eating, or it's a porcelain figurine of a cow, it says something about the life that they tried to have, that they were having, and maybe even what they wanted to have. This sort of hopes and dreams, and contrasted with the reality of trying to live here.
The mission for the Cultural Resource Management Team is not just to catalog its finds, but also to identify what occurred thousands of years ago, all the way up to the early 1900s, when the homestead efforts failed. That way, we can use the failures of our history to succeed in the future.
Looking back, across time, and people have asked that question, what happened? Why did this fail? And I think, at the very beginning, there was perhaps an idea that there was nothing that we couldn't achieve, in terms of engineering nature, engineering our environment. And I think there's a lot to be learned about understanding our environment and how those resources are finite. And, moving forward, understanding that balance between the development and our landscape and the environment and how we move forward.
I want to thank everyone at Idaho National Laboratory. And of course, I want to thank the viewer for making this possible. You have a great day.